Well, I'm just going to go ahead and welcome everybody. Thanks for coming today to the Region 3 Town Hall, sponsored in part by many, many entities. But I'm with the ARC of Southwest Alabama. We are here in Chatham. We are one of the service providers for Alabama Department of Mental Health on the ID waiver. So welcome, welcome. We appreciate you coming. This is the Alabama Department of Public Health. The bathrooms are just right between these two doors on the other side of the wall. Please silence your cell phones because this is being recorded and being broadcast online. So please silence your cell phones. And also, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand because we need you to use the microphone so that everybody at home that's going to hear the actual answers will hear the question as well. So that's what's going on with that. I want to introduce and welcome Tim Cooper. He is the Executive Director of the ARC of Alabama, who does so much for the state, but helps all of us ARCs in the state kind of stay together. We all collaborate, work together, all for the rights and services of people with disabilities. So I will pass over to Tim.
Thank you, Jessica. And once again, I want to do as she did, welcome all y'all to come today. The ARC of Alabama is based out of Montgomery, and we at the state office, the state ARC, we advocate for your rights and for the individual, your child, your nephew, niece, whatever, those individuals that are served and their families. We make sure that the legislature hears your voice, and they're not hearing our voice, they're hearing your voice, and we're making sure that they open their ears to hear that. And we make sure that whatever comes from the national levels gets down to our local chapters at the ARC of Alabama. And as Jessica says, she's a local chapter here in Southwest Alabama in Chatham. We have over 30 chapters throughout the state of Alabama, from north, south, east, and west. And we cover 38 counties with those services. And those local chapters are the ones that are in the trenches. They're providing the residential services, the community day habs, the group homes, the residential, the respite care. They're the ones doing all that. And so that's the ones that when you call us to ask questions or what kind of services, we direct you toward them, or another partner with us today, the Alabama Department of Mental Health, will make sure that your question gets answered. And speaking of answering questions, we hope today that the info that you receive will help you. And if you have questions, we hope they get answered. But that's what we're doing these town halls across the state for, is to make sure that these questions get answered and you get the services that you're seeking. So I hope you use this information. We're putting it out there for you to take and use, okay? We can't do it for you. We can give you the information. It's up to you to take it. And a lot of the phone calls that we get at the state ARC is, how can I do this? What do I need to do? So we give you that information. You've got to go and do it. And a lot of this, I hope, will help you in the future, because right now, probably 75% of our phone calls is my child or my sibling, or is their parents just died, or their sibling won't take care of them. What am I going to do? Now's the time to plan that. Okay, don't wait till it's later and you're stuck. Now's the time. You might feel like, okay, my daughter's only 20, 30, 40 years old. Now's the time, because you're not going to be here forever. I have a daughter. Kim has a son. We've got that in place, because we want that peace of mind knowing that when we actually gone, that they'll be taken care of. And I love my children. I love the siblings of my child, but I'm not counting on them. They love them. I know they do, but as soon as mom and dad's out of the picture, that ain't going to happen. I promise, because that's the other 25% phone call we get. I'm a sibling, and my mom and dad took care of my brother their whole life. I can't do that. I got a job. I got a family. What am I going to do? Well, we're saving that headache, hopefully, with this information. So please take this information, use it. If you forget about something or you lose a handout that we give you, this is being recorded, and thanks to Alex and Alabama Care. We usually put these out live for people on Facebook to join, but the signal's not too good in this thriving metropolis of Chatham. So we're going to record it, and it'll be on there. We're getting comments and questions from last year, so feel free to reach out to those recordings. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it over to our family outreach coordinator that's responsible for getting these put together for me. Her name's Kim Spangler. She is a great resource for the Ark of Alabama and for you as a parent, because she's one herself. So I want to introduce to you Miss Kim Spangler. Thank you.
I get an applause. Thank you, thank you. Thank y'all so much for coming. I was trying to greet people as you walked in, and we've got people that have driven over 2.5, 3 hours for this meeting. So this is a big deal, and we really appreciate your time and effort in being here. We want to give you all the information that we possibly can and get through it as efficiently as we can. So y'all all have little note cards in front of you and pens, and that's our gift to you. Take home, but use as much of those paper notes for questions. If you have a question, you want to hold it till the end, that's fine too. We might be able to answer your question in the process, and we might not. You get to the end, we haven't answered it yet, feel free to ask. One thing I do want to say is that we've got a lot of information in a short amount of time today. Are we going to wait a little bit longer with y'all, or do y'all want to start it out? Okay, great. I was hoping you would say that. So Amy Tabor is with us here today. She's the executive director of NAQ, and that is, we're privileged to have Amy here. She knows her stuff. She's been doing this for years and years and years. She's written several books. She's done so many speaking engagements that she could probably do this in her sleep at this point. But when it comes to the topic of human rights, Amy is your go-to human rights guru. Can I say that? She knows a lot about it, and she's here to share a lot about it with us. So we thank you for being here, and we can't wait to get more information on that. And we have Grayson Schumer, and I have always said ADMH, but now I feel like she's representative for the whole of the department, and anything on the legal side of those human rights, then Grayson can help us out that way too. So, and you've been with the department for a little over 2 years now, but experience goes way back, further than that. So we're very blessed to have both Grayson and Amy here today. And we might have a self-advocate joining us soon. And if we do, then we'll pause and introduce him as he comes in. So I'm going to let them get started and tip things off to you. And do y'all want to hold questions till the end of your presentation, just during? Okay. All right. And then we'll keep going. Thank you, thank you.
We also need to mention LaShondra here, who also drove. That's okay. LaShondra is, come up here, Grayson. Let's do this together.
Absolutely.
All right. You talk about
Yeah, this is LaShondra Young. She's our quality assurance specialist for Region 3 for ADMH, and she's here today as well to answer questions from the state's perspective as well as the provider perspective, because she has a lot of experience as a Q as well.
And the three of us spent how many months? Gosh, I think we're on 18, something like that at this point, doing the Human Rights Committee through a project with the Alabama Department of Mental Health. And we did 20 sessions. We trained over 333 people in this. So it was a huge thing. So the nice thing about the project is coming to an end, but these guys are keeping that training going on. So really excited about that. Come on in. Grab a chair. No worries. No worries. As Kim mentioned, I've written several books. One of the ones that's really funny, if you look at my copy, let me have yours, LaShondra. This is one that's been around for a long time. This is what it looks like when it's new. So LaShondra's got a lot of wear and tear she needs to put on hers at this point. But during the project, we've done 2 sessions. We did one for providers and we did one for self-advocates and parents. So we really wanted to make sure that we had this information accessible to everyone. Come on in. You good? Okay. Are we good with their PowerPoint?
I have the PowerPoint on the video I can insert it, but we're going to have to put the PowerPoint on that TV.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and come up there.
One thing that's been consistent among all of our training is that we struggle with technology. So we are well versed in terms of that. Yes, absolutely. And I'm not a resource, so very cool.
Give it a second to boot up.
No worries. So we're getting started. I'll just kind of share a little bit of a history around the Human Rights Committee. We in Alabama should be very proud of the fact that Human Rights Committees basically started in the great state of Alabama as a result of Wyatt Stickney in 1972. And it is something that's required federally in organizations. And it's been around for a long time, and we continue to elevate kind of the role of the committee itself.
This is all new to me, so we're gonna
Okay. In the beginning, human rights committees were committees that were charged with simply looking at probably behavior plans and meds for folks living in institutions, and then extrapolating that to other ICF settings and then into waiver-funded programs. In the beginning, there were 7 members, generally speaking. That was kind of like the magic number. And what we really wanted to make sure is that the committee membership was really representative of people who wanted to be on the committee. One thing that we know about human rights is that it's not black and white, right? It's all gray. And it's getting closer.
I don't know if this is the right file or not. I just clicked on something. Does this look familiar? It is on there, so we can.
We're
figure it
getting
out.
closer.
So USB, which one of these do you think it would be?
Did everybody get a copy of the slides as well?
That looks familiar.
And it is touchscreen. So
All right, nice. Okay. Can we get in presentation mode?
let's do. Three box.
Start slideshow. Nice. Look at you. So we're calling this presentation, Serving on a Human Rights Committee, an Opportunity to Learn and Lead. Okay. Just touch, right? This way? I got to touch?
Try touching in the middle, see what happens. Oh, there you go at the bottom.
Come on, Vanna.
Go at the bottom.
There we go.
I can stand here and do that.
Yeah. I'll be Patch Sajak, and, well, I guess he's retired now. I guess I have to be Ryan Seacrest, and you can be Vanna. So really, what we want to look at is what is it that we want to accomplish today in terms of, for the folks receiving supports, what is it that you want to understand about human rights committees? Sheldon, why are you here? What do you want to learn about? You want to learn everything. That's good. That's good. Okay. Some of you are Qs and work in the organization. We have some parents in here, right? Why are you all here? What do you want to learn?
Well, I understood that today was going to be telling us all about the upcoming things for the year and with the waivers.
Yes.
Self-directed and I guess community and whatever.
We have the amazing fortune of doing all of this kind of simultaneously. So, again, getting multiple organizations to work together to try and share this information with folks is going to be really important. So one of the things that we want to do is really, again, encourage diversity within the membership. What historically happened with human rights committees is that people who were employed by the agencies were people that typically were on the committee. Why might that not be a great idea? If only people working for the organization were on this human rights committee that's charged with the responsibility of ensuring that people have rights and those are protected. Say again? Yes, right. You don't want that in the same capacity. You really want to expand that role. You want to have other folks on there. I actually have in the book talks about a formula, and the formula isn't really as important. It's the notion that you get a lot of diversity in that. So one of the things that we want to make sure is that you have people outside the organization. It's okay to have a couple people on the committee, but you really want people receiving services on that committee. Why is that super important? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the people that are being affected directly. That makes the most sense of having that on the committee. When I was doing it back in the day, before it was kind of even thought of having people with disabilities on the committee, it was the biggest game changer that we had was when we put people with disabilities on that committee, because it changed from those people outside there to us inside the room. The woman that I remember doing, her name, I will never forget this woman, but she was a person who had multiple disabilities, and she lived in a nursing home for a very, very long time. She had cerebral palsy, and she had the entire use of one finger on one hand. And the organization that I was working for at the time liberated her, and that's exactly the right word, liberated her from the nursing home that she was stuck in for years and years and years. And she basically decided she was going to dedicate her life to helping other people. And so she was locked in her body. She had no intelligible speech, and she used a communication board in the day. And so she would come to our Human Rights Committee meetings. She'd sit next to me, and then she'd have a facilitator. But in those days, this is well before any kind of, tech stuff. She had a poster board, and the poster board had the alphabet, and it had some key words. And when Esmina, and she let me use her name, when Esmina wanted to share with us, she would spell out every single word. And you can imagine that took a lot of effort on her part, and it took a lot of effort on the committee's being patient. But when that woman spoke, she spoke in just the most amazing way. And she shared her insights differently than anybody else without a disability in that room. And towards the end of her life, kind of an interesting story, she got sick. So she did this for a number of years, and she was incredibly helpful. During the end of her life, she had to go to the nursing home. Well, she had to go to the hospital. Interesting that where we are, that I'm telling this story. She had to go to, the hospital. She got very, very sick and determined that she couldn't go back to her placement. And on her way to the nursing home, where she had been liberated years and years before, she died. And I love that story because that's exactly how she wanted it. She wanted that on her terms. So it's very important to have diversity on the HRC, and we want to make sure that we continue to do that with folks. Next slide, please. There we go. So why serve on it? Why do that? I mean, Esmina, knew that she was contributing when she was on the Human Rights Committee, but really it's an opportunity for people with disabilities and their family members and others to learn more about rights. It's an opportunity to advocate for others. If you have a soul around advocacy, as I know the people from the ARCs and the ARC of Alabama, that's the genesis of what y'all are doing. This is a great opportunity. It really helps to educate disability professionals. And when I use the term disability professionals, it's really around anyone who's working in the field. But it's helping them, learn more about what it is and be, present with disability issues. It's a volunteer organization. Why might that be important that it's a volunteer organization that you're not being paid? Why might that be important? What changes when you're being paid? Yeah, right. Hugely important to make sure. And it's an opportunity for people to meet people and do something good. You're volunteering with other people with a strong value system, and you want to contribute to making the organization a better place. How are we doing so far? Okay. Next. Thanks, Vanna. Okay, so what exactly is a Human Rights Committee? Again, it's something that's required. It's been around for a really long time. The reason we wrote the book, interestingly enough, was they told us that we had to have one of these, but they never told us how to do it. So we started figuring out what we were doing, and we were kind of doing it in a good way. People kept asking us questions, and then we were approached about how to write a book, and this is the 4th version. It was originally written in 1999, and this last one was written in 2016. Again, not telling you how to do it. Everyone agrees it's a good idea. We should do it. But how to do it's really the question. So really a Human Rights Committee is a group of people who work together to protect and promote people's rights, right? We review proposed rights restrictions. Again, in the beginning, all it was meds and behavioral programs. Today, it's much more than that. If you have a rights restriction of any sort, it's to be reviewed by the Human Rights Committee. And it's interesting to see because some people don't necessarily see everything as the same thing as rights. It is in a recommending role. So it's advising the directors who ultimately has that. So in terms of liability and things of that nature, it's on the shoulders of the director. And it really does help to establish this rights-enhancing culture. And when you go into an organization, I've worked in 30 states, I've done monitoring in a lot of them, you can walk into these organizations that are doing this well, and it feels different. You know? It feels like something else is going on and what you want it to be going on. So anyway, you want to take some?
All right, so what are some of our basic rights? And I want to hear from the group on this one. What rights do you have that are important to you? Let's start there.
Voting.
Okay, voting. Anybody else? Yeah, living independently, living where you want to live, right? That's a great one. Anybody else? No? Anybody? I hear. What? Free speech? Yeah. 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 Yes, reasonable taxation. I haven't heard that one. That's a good one. Yeah. I hear privacy a lot when I do these. Yeah, privacy is very important to all of us. All right. What about work? What about choosing where you want to work? It's a pretty important right. Okay. Choosing your friends. Pursuing your hobbies and interests, doing what you want to do, making your choices, right, throughout the day. Yeah? Yeah? Access to your information. Do you guys have information about you? And do you know where it is? And if you know where it is, can you go get it if you want to and look at it? That's very important, right? Yeah. Expressing your religious beliefs, that's a very important thing to people. Their religious, their spiritual beliefs, being able to make those choices. And a big one that's very important to me personally is making sure everybody is presumed competent unless they are legally proven otherwise. That's a big deal, okay? Anybody else? Any other rights you can think of based on this list that are important?
Ask a question, and it might be too early for this.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Entertain it for later if need be.
Absolutely.
Hang on.
Oh.
It's your mic.
Okay, when you say being presumed competent unless legally proven otherwise, can you define that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our field, right, a lot of times we're supporting people, and we're supporting people with the presumed idea that they can't make their own decisions, unfortunately. That happens sometimes. So you have the right, we all have the right, to be presumed that we can make our own decisions unless we go to court and, there's a legal order that says otherwise, and or supported decision making.
Making a decision even if you need support
Yes.
to make it qualifies as competent.
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Which is recognized by our court system at this point, which is, another
Okay.
way to do that. Absolutely. But really just us making our own choices, unless there has been something saying that we're unable to do that.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah. Safety? Absolutely.
And I think that's a lot where guardianship comes in, they might, I'm speaking in terms of
Hang
thinking
on,
of
babe.
my son.
Hang on. Sorry, y'all be patient with us. Hold it real close.
They might,
It's red. Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
they might be able to make their decisions, but sometimes other people's perceptions take away their safety, where they need legally somebody else to speak up for them that has the right to speak for them.
Yes, absolutely, and that's
And I think that's the biggest thing with guardianship is that, and speaking as a parent, you have, and I say this because it's happened to us, which is why I got guardianship, is that when my son was in a group home, he did not have the safety or the right to, well, he had the right to make decisions that we as parents did not feel covered his safety.
okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ties back into the supported decision making as an option, as an alternative to a legal guardianship, because technically, as she stated before, being able to make a decision with a group of people that you choose, which might include parents, might include other of people in your natural support network, is so important. And now that that's legally recognized as an alternative, that's an option as well to ensure safety and welfare for people.
So what would be the difference in, say, a person that is a legal representative, have legal representation, plus have power of attorney when it comes to making these decisions against someone with guardianship? Is there any difference far as the legal standpoint of it, or what?
There's a lot of different options, right, out there. And until recently, supported decision-making wasn't recognized legally. So there's a lot of things out there that have been in place for a very, very long time. It runs the gambit from a full guardianship, which is, pretty restrictive for a person, to a power of attorney. A power of an attorney is something that you can draft outside of the court system, and it's the person's choice if they want to appoint somebody. So you can limit them to certain things. So it's going to vary based on the documents that are provided. And so that's why it's very important, if you've got the documentation, to see what rights are granted and what that guardian who's been appointed, or the person who's been appointed as power of attorney, has a right to assist the person in making. A lot of them are limited to just medical decisions, if they need assistance with a medical decision, and then others are financial. So there's a lot of options. So it's hard to say for sure until you read the case-by-case document for that person and that guardianship.
So with a person that is appointed as the legal representative through DHR
Gotcha.
and the Social Security Office,
Okay.
per se over their finances and their
Sure.
living expenses,
Mm-hmm.
what would they have to do if you have siblings that would not be for the best interests of the person, for, say, pursuing the guardianship, or to protect the ID waiver person from the wrong person getting a hold to them in case of their death?
So if DHR is involved, I think that's your first stop, is addressing that with the representative from DHR. And absolutely, as a provider, if we're speaking in that perspective, advocating for that person, because they do have a choice in who maybe their rep payee is. If DHR is involved, it's a little different, right? But just advocating for that person, I would get advocacy involved. We have a great group of advocates that do assist with that, as well as ADAP. ADAP is somebody you can reach out to. That's a third party that can help, navigate that process if you want to advocate for that person. Anybody have anything else to add? I know, got some experts in the room here.
I'll just add real quick, when you're talking about rights, a lot of people will assume, and I've seen this so many times, that if there's somebody who is not verbal, then they need someone to speak for them, and that's just not the case. I truly believe, and I think there's some case law study to go along with this, that if you can communicate, then you can use something like supported decision-making to maintain those rights. So.
Absolutely. And one of the things we talk about a lot in these trainings are people who don't use words to communicate still communicate in different ways, right? And people who know them and observe and learn can tell you their preferences and like you said, support them in their decision making versus, making decisions for them. So, absolutely. Anybody else? All right. Oh, did it right that time. Can we watch this or no? I don't know if it'll work. Is that it? Webpage not available.
It may not be connected to the internet.
Yeah. Well, this is an awesome video. I wish we could watch it because it's from the person's perspective. It's really talking about rights. I think, is this the CQL? So if you're not familiar with the Council on Quality and Leadership, they have a lot of really great resources out there on their webpage and a lot of YouTube videos that can be utilized to learn not only about rights, but also about the waiver and the HCBS final rule. Probably there'll be one on the access rule here shortly. So just great information. So sorry we can't watch it today, but it is there and it is in your handouts if you want to go to the YouTube link that is available there. All right, so what are some common ways? We talked about rights. What are some common ways that we see that they're limited, that people aren't exercising those rights? Any examples? Well, let's take work, for example. We talked about work earlier. What if somebody wants to work and they're maybe told they can't, right? That's a big restriction. That's income, that's social capital, there's a lot of things there that the person is not getting if they're told they're not able to work, right? What are some other examples that you guys can think of?
Telling them what they can eat, not eat, what they can wear,
Yeah?
their choices of where they can go and can't go,
Yeah?
on special activities and stuff.
All great examples. So she said access to food, right? We've heard a lot about that lately, making decisions for the person on what they're eating, making decisions on what they're allowed to wear, all of that stuff. Now, if you guys were told those things, you can't work, you have to eat this certain food, you can't wear this, how does that make you feel? Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. We'd all be mad if we, yeah. And so sometimes, because we're maybe limiting some rights, we're just perpetuating a cycle where things aren't getting better. We've got to really be sure that people's rights are there and that they have choice and that they're able to do anything. Let's see. Want to add anything to that one? No? Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
See, that time I waited. Do you guys recognize, let me phrase that right. Do you guys recognize times when limitations of rights aren't absolutely essential?
Absolutely.
I mean, that you really do
Yes.
need to do that?
Yes, and that's a big piece of what these trainings offer. Look, oh, my little signs I made. I know, I was so excited about them. Yeah, so absolutely. So a restriction is something that we consider, we're limiting somebody's rights. They can't eat a certain kind of food because we just decided they can't, right? Whereas potentially, if they have a medical diagnosis where maybe they have diabetes and they want support to eat and have a healthier lifestyle to maintain it for medical purposes, we would not consider that a restriction. We would consider that a support, right? Because the person medically needs to have a different type of diet and wants to follow that diet. That's the other piece. The person has to consent and have informed choice about it. But in one case, dietary restrictions would be considered a restriction, but in another case, it might be a support. So you would limit the right.
Quick example. When one time somebody advocating for the stepson, I was telling Tim this earlier, well, okay, he could take the bus. And my wife and I both came up at the same time and said, no, he cannot take the bus, because if he gets on the bus, he'll wind up in an alleyway somewhere. He will not get home. He does not have the cognizant ability to recognize danger to not go with a stranger if you put him on the bus.
Okay.
That kind of thing. I mean, restricted because, well, you need him to come back.
Yeah.
Preferably not in a body bag. And it's like, if you leave him on the bus, he's likely to come back that way.
And that's what we utilize human rights committees for. We come back to that, and that's what this training really is about. The Human Rights Committee would have that presentation. They'd look at the information and kind of make a decision. Hey, does this right need to be limited so we can support the person versus restrict the person? And so the HRC really does that work. They look at it from an outside perspective. They look at all the information. The person's there. They can speak up if possible and say, and or their advocates can be there and present that information to the HRC, who then goes through and makes a determination. Now, all of those supports that are limiting someone's rights are time limited. So it may be that, you look at it every 3 months, 6 months, year, and see maybe if the person has, developed certain skills, because you have education that's associated with that. So ultimately, the hope is that person can be more independent, but they have to look at it over time and then continue to make that decision, whether it's a restriction or support. So yeah, there are many times for health and safety, absolutely. It just has to go through that due process.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And in terms of the restriction as well, here, you hold these. That, as Grayson mentioned, everything is time limited. So there's no such thing as a rights restriction that's permanent and forever. So as she suggested, it's time limited. You also need to make sure that there's education. So as soon as the restriction gets into place, that there's education in place to try and help remove that restriction. So it's only in place for as long as it needs to be. And there's a whole cycle of that process to make sure that you're, catching all of that. And when that, if you talk about Human Rights Committee being the due process, the informed consent process is huge. And I think we've got a slide on that in a couple minutes, or maybe sooner. Let's go to. I just saw it. Let's talk about kind of informed consent. So something happens in a person's life, right? Something that causes us a concern. One of the first things is that we need to make sure the person understands why this option was selected. And this person, I'm talking also, the parents or whomever, want to know what the alternatives were. What were the other possible choices that could have been suggestion? Because they're this is all in recommending, right? Then you're getting the benefits. What are the benefits of the procedure, if it's a medical procedure, or the risk of that? It's easy to talk about medical procedures in this instance because those have become a lot more obvious. Then you want to make sure the person has an opportunity to ask questions. And that whole cycle makes the informed consent. So a lot of organizations, informed consent, unfortunately, gets boiled down to the signature, right? Some kind of signature on the form, and that gets informed consent. We need to do away with that understanding and really look at this entire cycle. So you've got the process of due process with the Human Rights Committee, and you really want this to happen before Human Rights Committees review it. You want to make sure that due process has occurred, and you want to make sure that informed consent has occurred. Does that make sense? Sorry, got us out of a little cycle here. Yeah, that one.
All right, so your rights and responsibilities. It's important to stay informed of the issues that are affecting your community, participating in the democratic process, like Jessica said, voting. And then, local, federal, and state laws, as well as respecting the rights, beliefs, and opinions of others. So the big key here is that we've got these wonderful rights that all humans have, but we also have responsibilities, right? We do have to be good neighbors, as I like to say. So we can't have our rights negatively affecting those around us. That's why we have federal, state, and local laws to ensure that those things happen. So what are some of the things you guys do to show responsibility? Like I said, being a good neighbor. What are some examples of that you guys do?
Yeah. Yeah. Not littering, recycling, volunteering. Those are great examples. Yeah. Bathe. Yeah. I mean, depends on where we're going to be, but if we're in a small space, that's a good idea. All right. One of the examples I usually like to give, I mean, it's as simple as letting somebody out when you're driving your car. Let them get in front of you. Don't, cause a traffic jam on the Bayway. But yeah, those are some things that we can do to show responsibility and be good neighbors and good citizens. And so we already kind of touched on this a minute ago, but really the role of the Human Rights Committee is to ensure due process, which I brought up before. It's giving that objective view of these restrictions and these limitations on rights that are being brought forth to the committee that aren't provider-led, right? We talked about that at the beginning, that's a conflict, that they can look at it and say, well, is this really the least restrictive thing that we can do to ensure the health and safety of someone? And if we need to put a restriction in place, let's make sure that it's a support and that it's done in the right way and it's looked at and we're making sure over time that person is, being able to let go of that rights restriction that was brought before the committee. Again, making sure they're used when only absolutely necessary. That's a big piece of it. And I don't know if we have a slide on this yet, but dignity of risk. I'm not sure if that pops up later. But that's really considering, we do want to make sure people are healthy and that they're safe, but we also want to make sure everyone, just like we do, has the dignity of risk. And I always give the example of, when you're young, maybe, you went off after you moved out of your parents' home. You made some mistakes, right? I made a mistake yesterday. We make mistakes throughout our lives. And so we have to afford everyone the opportunity to make mistakes. So just keeping that in mind, that only when they're absolutely necessary, because we need to be able to make mistakes to learn and to grow as well. And then making sure that those committee members are independent and that they're reviewing their practices objectively. Any questions on HRCs? Oh, do you want to do the example? You're so good at this.
So one of the really fun things that we did in this training was that we did scenarios, because scenarios really kind of solidify the information. And so we came up with one that we thought would be really good for folks. So I'm just going to read this and then we can kind of chat about this. So, and this would be something that you could review in Human Rights Committee, obviously. Sam lives in a house with 2 other men. One of his housemates is on a strict diet, and the staff makes sure there's only healthy food in the house. Sam is not happy with this and purchased his own personal snacks and stored them in his room. When staff discovered his snacks, they insisted that he move the food to the kitchen, where staff placed them in a locked cabinet. Now, when Sam wants his snacks, he must ask staff to unlock the cabinet. Sam is not happy with the solution. So what do you think about that? Other thoughts?
As long as when he asks for it, he has access to it. But it's best to probably keep the roaches away from the facility.
Let's hear it.
I need a roaches,
Keep the roaches
to
away.
flush it away.
Yes, do it in a safe way. Yeah, okay.
Keeping food in the kitchen is an appropriate place, but maybe don't lock it.
But then the other person.
Or was it being locked to keep the diabetic out of it?
I guess we don't necessarily know. And that's the fun part of doing the scenarios, is we insert all that. It is. So,
Does Sam have a key to the lock?
should Sam have a key?
Yes.
If one thing we've learned with HCBS, people should have their keys, right?
Because I can see locking it up in the sense of keeping in mind that we have a house full of presumably disabled people, and so you might have a diabetic go dig in the thing and get the candy. If the candy's in this room, they brought up roaches, so that was also a very good point. So for Sam to have a key would be the obvious solution, at least to me, but I'm not an expert.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Well, I will say, I have a diabetic son, and when he was younger, I had to do two things. One, sugar in it, and anything with sugar in it, like cake mixes, I had to lock it in the pantry, because he would eat sugar out of the container, so I ended up labeling it as flour, and eventually having to lock it up. But that was pretty simple. I mean, you could talk to him, and he's been to all the diabetic programs, and, but bottom line is, I end up taking him to the emergency room because he's not able to really choose the right choice. So that's not the right choice.
So is there a difference between a family-owned home and a provider-owned setting where maybe like somebody that might live in my home, I can lock a cabinet that I want locked, but if I run an organization and I have a group home, then the person that lives there has access to their home? Where's the difference in those two?
Well, quality assurance.
Well, what I'll say is that it's their home. It's not the provider's home. Like ultimately.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly in that
So-
situation. But that where it is their home versus a private-owned home where a son lives with their parents. The parent
Sure.
can lock whatever cabinet they might want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So from an agency standpoint to a self-directed or, personal care standpoint, it might be different.
It is, and the advocacy associated with it is different. I'll put it that way. So we've got, and we encourage self-direction. We actually have been expanding that quite a bit. We had, not to give out stats, but on our new waiver, over 30% of the people on the new waiver that we have are self-directing services, which is pretty amazing. But what we see on that waiver and the self-direction is really working with their caregiver and whoever that is. They might live with a parent or a brother, whoever, or a natural support of some kind. And it's the same type of advocacy. It's still, they have rights, and you would still work with them on ensuring that those rights aren't restricted, and it would still need to go through the same due process.
So who would that HRC be for self-directed?
For the it would be, well, that's interesting. I would go through advocacy if needed for that. Yep. But it would need to go through some type of due process. We do not, I don't think, have the HRC as a requirement in the regs for that.
So just saying somebody that lives at home
Exactly.
with their parents can lock whatever they want away from them and what's in place to
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, that's their decision, right? But I would just say you would advocate as a case manager or if needed. It would be part of the person-centered planning process. Yep.
It's interesting when you talk about these things where the passion stuff comes in, and food is hugely a
Right.
huge topic with folks, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, and people have lots of opinions about that. And again, that's the beauty of the Human Rights Committee, is having those varied combination of thoughts and experiences through that. If we substitute a food to, a person's radio, you don't see nearly the passion of this, but it's somebody's stuff. It's someone that they bought, that they had, their own funds, and they're being told that they can't have access to it. So it's an interesting thought. Go ahead.
Well, the question I had, since you mentioned the self-directed, what if a person's got a guardian? Would the guardian become the director of the self-director? Could you just not get one?
Well, you have an employee of record, right? And that's going to be the person that works with PL or Allied to do that. It's really all going to go back to the person-centered plan. I mean, that's where your due process is going to happen. So the guardian will be involved in that, as well as the person, their team, and that's how that'll work. But the EOR is the employee of record that would be responsible for, I guess, the administration of those services.
Because right now it's the guardian who does that. So that was.
Yeah, and I think with the new amendment, they're going to continue, that's going to be acceptable. For a while there, it wasn't, but I think. Yeah.
So
Okay. Any other thoughts on this example? Like you said, there's a lot of, we don't have a lot of information, so we'd have to have more information to make some of those final decisions. But that's why the HRC is there. We already went over this, so move forward. Oh, that's good. Do you want to do that?
Sure. So when we have the Human Rights Committee, what does it really mean to be a member of that? And for people receiving supports, it means coming to for everyone, it's the same responsibility. You come to the meetings, you participate in the meetings, you ask questions, you dialogue with other people in the room in terms of, what makes the most sense. You need to come to the meetings. Like, when are the meetings? If you're going to be a part of this, how often are the meetings? I would say it ranges, and we know this actually. We did a demographic survey. Most often they're quarterly in the great state of Alabama. Some organizations would have them more frequently. If you're a larger organization, you're probably going to have more meetings, more like probably a monthly meeting. But on average, it's 4 times a year or 12 times a year, depending on that. So you want to make sure that your schedule allows for that. When are they? How long do they last? Can you be at the meetings? If you're going to be a member, you need to make sure that you're there. And what rules must be followed? Sometimes this is the first committee that people have ever been on. And so those of us who are on infinite numbers of committees understand kind of the rules. When do you talk? When do you ask questions? When do you stay after? If there are, snacks, do you eat the snacks, not eat the snacks? All those kinds of things. The number one reason that people share about why not to have people with disabilities on this committee goes down to the next one, and that's around confidentiality. People have concerns that people with disabilities cannot maintain confidentiality. Well, my perspective is that you need to worry about confidentiality, everyone, right? Everyone who's on the committee, everyone's on the room. If you can maintain confidentiality, you're going to be a much more effective Human Rights Committee, because people are going to bring the issues and understand that the information will be kept confidential. And if you're a person, whether you're with or without a disability, who can you ask for support? So you might need some extra help in terms of how to be an effective member, how to interact, what questions to ask, and how. And very often the chair will be that person to answer those questions for you. The next part would be getting ready for the meetings. Again, make time in your schedule, understand when those are, and be there. How are you going to get there? If you're a person who relies on other people for transportation, you need to make sure that you can get there and get there on time. You're going to review any materials. Sometimes materials are sent in advance. You want to review those materials and just, in general, be prepared. And again, if you have questions, have those ready, and consider calling or meeting with someone else on the committee. To prepare. So if you're not confident about what you're going to say, going to do, then meet with someone else. And again, mostly that would be the chair. That'd be a chair's responsibility. And so again, your to-do list, if you're considering being a member, is to be on time, listen to the information, ask questions respectfully. You can imagine sometimes these conversations get a little heated because people approach this with very specific mindsets. I can think of food and smoking probably are the two most passionate ones. If you're trying to reduce someone's ability to smoke, or put them on a smoking schedule, or convert them into patches or something like that, people definitely feel very strongly about that. And share your perspective. You're there for a reason. You were chosen to be on this committee, and there's a values piece to there that needs to be matched. And then again, if you need help, ask for it. That's how we can help folks. So just have to remember that it's okay not to talk at every meeting. You don't have to talk. You can just be present and pay attention. Observing and listening are great skills, and particularly at the Human Rights Committee, they're very helpful. Paying attention, and then talk to the chair if you have questions or concerns after a meeting are good ideas. So how do you want to decide if you want to be a Human Rights Committee here? First of all, I'd say it's a great idea, but it needs to come, from you. You don't want other people trying to talk you into it, trying to coerce you into it, or trick you into it. I used to joke that in the early days, that people weren't always honest about what you talk about, because you're going to talk about really tough subject matter, right? You're going to talk about, people have been hurt. It gets really tough, and people have to be able to absorb that and be able to talk about that. Does it fit with other things that are important to you? Are you great at advocating for peers? Do you like learning new things? Are you willing to do the work? Do you have access to the help that you might need to be a successful Human Rights Committee chairperson or member? And is volunteering important to you? Because this whole thing's around volunteering. As you suggested earlier, if you get paid, it changes the relationship. Even other things, I've seen them where I had an attorney one time who was paid. This was in DC. I'm not sure why that necessarily makes a difference, but that's the only place I've ever seen an attorney be paid to be on this committee, which changed the dynamics because they were looking for the check. And then do you really, 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 really want to do it? This isn't, like going to a music concert or a movie, or this is a big deal. And again, the conversations are often really difficult. So you got to decide, balance the yes and the no. If that's something that you want to do.
So knowing all that, big question. Do you want to be an HRC member? We have this great group of people like you, if interested, are the perfect fits for these types of committees. And I know most organizations are always trying to recruit and find people to be on the committees, because you also don't want the same people on the committee for 10 years. I've seen that happen before, because then you lose that diverse perspective. So I'm just saying, we've got a good group in here. Anybody's interested, I bet you could change contact information. Go ahead.
How many committees are there within the state and then nationally? Do we know a number to put with that?
That's a great question.
So it's going to be hard to calculate. We don't really necessarily know, because some organizations have dedicated ones, which we can talk about that independent committee, so every agency would have one. Some smaller organizations combine and do that combo kind of thing going on. So it's really hard to tell. That would be something we might be able to find out.
I was going to say that would be a good survey, and I love a good survey. So that might be something we look into. I think as we were going around the state and participating, the larger organizations would have their own typically, whereas the smaller ones, I learned very quickly, we're doing the consortium model.
Sorry, I said it wrong. Not combination, consortium.
Oh, yeah, where, they had maybe 5 agencies using the same committee because they're smaller and, it didn't.
One example would be, so Jessica is the director here in this county. I'm here in Clark County, and so we have our own HRC committees. We do not share, but we come together for our BPRC because that requires certain educational levels and requirements for a chair. So
yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things we talk about in the training is how BPRC and HRC are really 2 different things, and we do not encourage them to be combined together on the same day, the same committee.
Or the same membership.
Yeah, or the same membership, because it's 2, like you said, different perspectives. You need the clinical staff on the BPRC versus your HRC. You're looking for just people in the community that share a common interest.
And I'm on the record for saying basically that when they're combined, that the rights takes a second backseat to all of that. So it really does. The behavioral component overwhelms that, and the backseat or second seat or something like that. So it's really not a good idea. And again, for those of you who have seen it in the book, that whole flow chart, there's a definition and an order to which, and you want to make sure that the BPRC reviews things, the Behavior Review Committee reviews the plan before it goes to the Human Rights Committee for, kind of the obvious reasons that you want to make sure it's vetted first. You don't want the Human Rights Committee reviewing something that hasn't been vetted properly by the behavior folks. Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions about HRC committees? Interested in participation? Okay. Let's see. All right. So if you're thinking yes, contact a Human Rights Committee chairperson and get the process started. No, keep looking for other opportunities to make a meaningful connection. Not sure, just keep it in mind, keep it in the back of your head. Review this information, see if it's right for you. If an opportunity presents itself, make the decision at that time. I'll say kind of in the middle of my career, I was not in this field, and I was a member of an HRC committee, and then that turned into a job. So you never know what'll happen. All right. Any other questions? If not, thank you. There it goes. Look at the cute squirrel.
Thank y'all so much. We appreciate your time. Did you want to get a chance to speak? You good? Okay. All right. So, we covered human rights. Y'all, that's a huge topic, especially in the population of people that we serve. I should preface everything that you're about to learn. When I come to these meetings, I always wear 3 hats. I have a parent hat, I have a sibling hat, and then I have a professional hat. So I take those hats on and off throughout the conversation, and if you'll be patient with me, I might give you a heads up on which hat I'm wearing at the time when I answer questions. But just know that going forward. Yes, ma'am? 1 minute. Go for it. Go for it.
Hey everybody, my name is LaShondra Young, and I did want to say I do quality assurance with the state of Alabama, and I do provide technical assistance for the region. I've met with plenty of y'all, well, 2 or 3 of y'all, and talk with some of y'all over the phone. So if y'all ever need assistance with anything with HRC or just anything in general, then I'm that person that you can call. Thank you. Thank you.
Contact information with people. Okay, we will give out contact information at the end of the meeting for everybody who is speaking today, and we'll have it online recorded as well. So if you missed it, you can always go back. It'll definitely be posted on Alabama Cares Facebook page, and hopefully we'll get it up on our other Facebook pages or other social media and websites as well. For me, as a parent, being able to contact the right people to ask the right questions in our journey, raising my child with a disability was huge. And so for no other reason than that, I would attend these meetings just to get names and numbers of people that we could ask questions to. Encourage questions, encourage comments. We've got 5 different topics to cover in what I'm going to share with you. So the first topic that I want to cover is HCBS and the new compliance standards. So does anybody know what HCBS stands for and why that's a thing? And I'll give you a hint. We just spent about 30 minutes on why that's a thing. HCBS, Home and Community-Based Services. So home and community-based services. Why is it important that we refer to something that we're doing, especially with the population people that we serve, as home and community-based, or settings, I should say, service? So what happened 50 years ago is that when people who were diagnosed with a disability came to their doctors, frequently, doctors would recommend that they be institutionalized. And those institutions would cause isolation, segregation, and all kinds of other abuse and harm and neglect that went along with settings that involved isolation or segregation. And we realized pretty quickly that that may not have been the best idea. And so home and community-based settings start, I guess, officially in Alabama 2018. 2014. That's even worse. Okay. So 2014, well, regardless, 2024, here we are. It's in full swing. And so all of the providers in our state who work with Medicaid, because this is a federal ruling, who provide any services to people with a disability are now legally obligated to make sure they meet certain standards so that isolation and segregation do not occur. We provide those services in the homes and the community settings. That's a lot of where you see the community waiver program coming. So for a long, long time, this whole entire field was dominated by something that we would refer to as crisis-driven. So we all lived through COVID, right? We saw what happens in an emergency or health crisis. And along with the isolation and segregation that occurred during COVID, there was just a lot of negative outcomes for people. And so in an effort to get our state out of a crisis-driven mindset toward services this way, we have become compliant with home and community-based setting standards. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? So we know institutionalization is bad. We know we know this from COVID. We know sitting at home all day, not going out, not being around people, not doing anything is bad. It causes harm mentally and physically. It's not a good idea, right? So we've got to get back to an inclusive environment, right? So that's where all this is coming from. So online, you can Google this, and this is another thing I like to do at these meetings. I'll just say Google it. But you can Google a very user-friendly video called Home and Community-Based Settings, and it's a government website, but it uses plain language to describe what home and community-based settings is all about. I would highly recommend you share that video with all your friends, go online to social media, put it up on your page, call all of your providers and make sure they have watched it because of the plain language that it uses for people with a disability or for adults like me that don't know all the big words. That's a great video to kind of get the bottom line and foundational understanding of it. All right, so questions on home and community-based settings, the standards or the rulings. All right, so if you are a person receiving services from a provider, especially if they are Medicaid-funded services, then you should have access to your community, right? That's what this is all about. And what does access mean? What does it look like? It's going to be different for everybody. That's never the same. And you shouldn't always be doing the same thing every day with the same people. That's different for everybody. Questions or comments about that? I can see the wheels turning, Betty. You want the mic?
No, I'm just saying,
Hang on.
my son,
You need the mic.
I was going to say, sometimes it is the same. My son has autism, so some days he wants to do the very same thing every single day. You know, that doesn't stay forever, but, you know, that does happen a lot.
So the setting might be the same for your son, is what you're saying?
Well, he likes to go to the library, so it might be his caregiver takes him to the library every day of the week, you know, maybe for a month, and then he sees something else he wants to do, like maybe a car show or the airport. But a lot of days it is the same thing. He likes to go thrift shopping, so a lot of days they may go to different shops, but that's what they do. That's what he likes to do.
So that's a great example of why it's so important to individualize these services and have a person-centered plan that reflects those individual interests, right? Because what's important to one person is not always important to another. And that's huge in the person-centered plan. So while you're doing a person-centered plan, you can go and watch that video, and it gives you some really good tips on how to make sure your person-centered plan is driven through access to the community. So that's a great example. Okay.
This is kind of off subject, but
Go ahead.
I don't know, it was brought up earlier about their rights. when it gets to work, that is a concern. They need choices there, and that doesn't always exist. Even though you try to get them jobs, that doesn't exist.
Yep. So you're talking about the ability to choose where you want to work, when you want to work, or whether or not you want to work, correct? So that's, again, going back to that person-centered plan and making sure you're individualizing those preferences, wants, needs, and desires. But that should be written into the person-centered plan.
And the employers have the ultimate say-so. It's not just about, yeah, I agree.
And it may not be something, that they want to work, but it may not be something available that they can do, or able to do, and want to do. Or that it's safe for them to do.
Without the support there. I get that a lot. Okay, question?
Yes. When it comes to Medicaid waivers, is employment the
Is your
ultimate?
mic on? Okay. Okay. If it's on, you're good.
All right.
Thank you.
How are we now?
Go ahead.
Okay. Is it the end goal of a Medicaid waiver, community waiver, that they wind up with employment? I mean, is that one of the things you're looking for?
So you don't place the goals on the waiver. You place the goals on the person.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have a waiver and you go into a person-centered plan meeting and that person's goal is employment, then that's where your starting point is. Does that make sense?
It does. Next question, because before he started receiving benefits, we tried on numerous occasions for him to have jobs just out in the public.
Mm-hmm.
To put it bluntly, he was essentially eaten alive. I mean, to work as a sacker in a grocery store with mostly teenagers when he's about 12 in mentality himself.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, this is with every kind of opportunity for training. This is with most everything you guys have advocated. There's never been any significant improvement. I mean, and he's 40 now, so this is where you're starting to crawl into, is this where we are?
Okay.
So with that
So
being the
he's had
case,
the job coaches and the support.
oh, he's
and all
had
that.
everything. And in this particular case, we're talking about a person who the parts of the brain that don't function do not appear to function. I mean, there's certain things that cognitively he just doesn't get it. And we don't even know that he can get it because the attempts have been made, and yet in 5 years on this waiver of goals,
Well,
one goal was met by Medicaid, but he still does the same things that we were trying to ward off.
Okay. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to take off my professional hat and put my parent hat on right now, if you'll allow me.
Oh, please do.
So with my child, I don't ever want to see him give up. I want to see him always try. And I'm going to put my sibling hat on now. That comes from a sibling perspective of growing up with parents who would coddle and cater to my sister. And so I went the other extreme, maybe too far sometimes. You'll have to ask my son. I don't ever want to see that happen either. At the same time, I want to respect the person's right to choose, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, if my son can communicate and he's telling me for various reasons, I don't want to work, then I need to respect that, whether I agree with it or not.
Right.
Okay? So that's the end of the day bottom line on that one.
Which in our case,
was my
it came
professional hat at the end.
in
so.
the step-parent hat, which is the only one I've really got. It
Mm-hmm.
came down to, good Lord, you got to go talk to the union people. You got to go address the various things that have happened. You got to go, it even comes down to you got to keep him safe. Because if you leave him to
Safety's
his own
important,
devices, if you leave him to his own devices, he will not be safe. He will go out of his way not to be safe.
Well, yeah.
So we always have to approach
safety's
that
key and very important.
because it's a very real danger.
Has this
so-
made it around to everybody? Yeah, safety is is crucial.
So when it comes to goal setting, and he has a guardian, how much of that is centered on him setting the goal, and how much has to be done in a realistic fashion as to something he can actually achieve? I guess
I'm
that's my
not
question.
very good at numbers, so I can't break it down in a percentage or anything. Or maybe Amy could, I don't know. But at the end of the day, if he can communicate, then that needs to be something that the guardian takes into consideration if he's already been assigned a legal guardian.
Oh, yeah.
If he can communicate, then that needs to be a choice that is respected by him, whether or not the guardian agrees or disagrees with it. And I'll let y'all in on a big, it's not a big secret, it's a little secret now, everybody knows. There will soon be a Bill of Rights passed in the state of Alabama for people who are placed under guardianship that will hold guardians to a higher account to make sure that rights are not being denied that way. So, yay.
Okay, well, can I ask one other question
Sure.
based on that Bill of Rights? What if the person wants something or to do something, say, for example, driving, that would very clearly pose a danger to others? Now you're not talking about just a danger to the person anymore. Now you're talking about other people, potentially lots of other people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then what?
Let me say something before you get going, actually. On the community waiver, you asked what's the ultimate goal. There was two things, okay? The first thing, you said your stepson, I think when we was talking earlier, had just been receiving services 5 years ago, okay? Had the community waiver not been in place, your stepson probably would still be on the waiting list of the ID and LLH, okay? So the number one goal of the community waiver was to get those off the waiting list into receiving services, okay? Number two, if your son doesn't want to work, that's not the ultimate goal. The word community in the community waiver is the ultimate goal. Getting them out of the house, into the community. That don't mean they can't still live in the house, okay? They're not forcing you into a group home in the community. They can still live at home. But it's getting out, going to the library, like this lady said, going to do recreational things, going to church, whatever that plan is, but do it out in the community. Get them out of the house is basically the goal, okay? So they're not just sitting there like we all did in COVID, okay? That was the gist of the waiver, okay? Does that make sense to you?
It does. It's not, we might just not be to that point yet.
Right.
Exactly what I'm asking.
Yeah.
But maybe as we go, we'll approach that better to where I can.
Right. You just, and what I'm telling you is different to her, it's different to Kim's family, it's different to Ash, whatever. It's all about your situation, okay? And so you know your stepson better than any of us in this room. He knows himself better. So what he says, is the ultimate goal of what he wants to do, and we have to honor whether we like it or not, or whether we think he can do it or not. That's the ultimate goal. But the other thing is we just got, you're getting the services now that you can make that decision when it comes to it. Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Ashley. I'm sorry.
And so for like the driving thing, so with us as an organization, we meet them where they are. We have some people that want to drive, and it's starting where they're at, meeting them where they are. We have a driving simulator, and so we start there. And so it might not be that they ever get to the highway, but we provide supports or trainings that's our goal, and we start where they're at. So, at the point that it's completely unsafe for everybody else and he's out there, well, what makes it unsafe is what I would look at. And then what could we do to educate, train, provide the experience, exposure to allow that to happen in a safe environment to train to be able to generalize that behavior somewhere else. That's what I was going to suggest about the driving piece.
CWP waiver real quick. You're absolutely right. I think some of the confusion may happen because there are two priorities that are listed for the waiver, which is employment and preserving the existing living arrangement. And that's really just about the wait list piece. Those are the people that get moved off the wait list first, if that's identified as a goal. But it doesn't mean that that's the only goal of the CWP. So I just wanted to clarify that because that language is there and that may be what you were referring to.
Thank you. So I don't know if I said this already or not, but if I didn't, I'm saying it again, or if I did, I'm saying it again. The community waiver is a great example of taking us from a more reactive state where we were crisis driven with all of these waivers to a more proactive state where we're not crisis driven and we're doing things proactively to prevent the crisis. So the patience piece is there, and I kind of want to reflect or compare that with the driving with my son, because in Tuscaloosa, where he lives now, he does not drive, but he can. He has his license, and when he lived at home with us, he could easily drive from home to work on his own because it was a different environment than where he lives now. And so we're restricting his right to drive right now, but it's for his safety and others. And so I don't like it, and trust me, he hates it, but you've got safety comes first. But as we grow and we learn and he practices more and more, and maybe he finds a different route to take when he moves to a different house here soon, then we could inch it up a little and try a little bit more. We don't ever want to just take it away completely and say, no, you can't drive. It's not safe. And so the community waiver program is a lot like that, where we're trying and we're inching things up and we're putting things in place now for if one day. So, all right. Good examples, questions, comments. I'm going to pass these around. This is the community waiver program. Everybody grab one. And Grayson, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are more counties added now as compared to what we have on this list.
It's the same 11.
Same, okay. Well,
It'll be 5 years where we can read that.
but there might be less than 11 on here. Y'all tell me. This is where my numbers thing comes in. Okay, so we've got Baldwin, Elmore, Houston, Jefferson, Limestone, Madison, Mobile, Montgomery, Morgan, Tuscaloosa, and Walker counties. Was anybody counting? Was that 11? That's 11. Okay, good. So this is an up-to-date resource for you. All right, but if you'll look on here, this talks about all of the things that would qualify someone for the community waiver program. Got the front and the back. All right, so y'all take that home, share it. This is a program that's starting with this waivers to kind of be proactive in a way to get people supports at an earlier age and stage than they would have otherwise gotten. All right. Now, I'm going to pass these around, and this is a lovely resource from ADAP. ADAP has given us the ability to kind of cross-reference all of the waivers that are provided in our state. Okay, so we've got on this, let me get my reading glasses back on. We've got all these waivers being offered. Elderly and disabled. That's one of them. Intellectual disability, living at home. These are the titles of the waivers. We've got technology assisted. We've got Alabama Community Transition, which is also referred to as ACT, and the State of Alabama Independent Living Waiver, SAIL. Did I miss any besides community waiver on the back? Okay. So this is a compare and contrast kind of a chart that helps you look at the different services provided under the different waivers, so you can have in black and white what's listed under each waiver. And I love this resource because it's always good to take a really hard, long look at this for two reasons. If you've already qualified for a waiver, to make sure that you're accessing all of the services available to you on that waiver. And then secondly, if you see another waiver that has better or more services that are different than the services provided on the waiver you're on now, then you can talk to the department about changing waivers. All right? Questions? Comments? Okay, and if you want to talk to the department, when I say department, I'm talking about the Alabama Department of Mental Health, about your waiver or the waiver that your loved one is on, then I'm going to pass around this resource. And this resource has all of the numbers that you would call. The vast majority of people that we serve from ARC of Alabama as a provider would want to call the number right here listed that says, it's orange, that says developmental disability. All right, there's some other departments on there as well, but this is the number that you would call to speak with someone. If you already have a support coordinator in place, then obviously speak with your support coordinator. Okay, questions, comments on this? We're good? All right, this is easy. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you about, and I don't have a handout for this, but I'm going to pass these out as well. And this just talks about how to get on the waiver services. This is easy peasy. It's directional. It's a little flow chart. You've got yes or no questions that you would answer. If you're not already on a waiver and you're trying to understand why, this might help. Last but not least, no, it's not last. I got two more things. I'm sorry. Almost last. Remote supports. Does anybody know about or has anybody heard about remote supports? It's different than, it's not different than, because it is technology, but it's different than augmentative communication or some kind of tech support like that. I'm talking about remote supports where, for example, you would have someone call in to make sure and speak with your loved one who's living independently to make sure they have taken their medication, communicating with them on an iPad, helping them understand how to use a GPS when they go out into the community. Those are examples of remote supports, and these caregivers are not there in person. They're accessed through technology. Does that make sense? So that's something the department is working on expanding throughout our state. And I'll give you an example, and Amy's going to be all over me for using this as an example, but it was this is how I got to sleep at night. And I considered it in a way, a remote support. When my son was away at school in Tuscaloosa and I could not see him or know that he was okay, I would utilize Life 360. And then if I couldn't find him on Life 360 because his phone died or the Life 360 would not locate, I would quickly pick up my phone and FaceTime him because I could not go to sleep until I saw his precious face. So that might fall under rights restrictions. I don't know. But as a mom, it was great, huge peace of mind. And that's very similar to what happens with remote supports. These are all things that are discussed and can be part of the services delivered in community waiver. What other ones? All of them? It's not. Oh, great. That's news to me. All waivers. Okay. So as we expand this program and we see technology increase, it's going to help us supplement, not replace, but supplement people having to be hands-on in person. So that's going to be a godsend for a lot of people here soon. Any questions about remote supports? If you want a good name to contact, I can give you that. Her name is Melissa Waters for this area, right? Melissa Walters for this area, and she is with Safe at Home. There are some other companies and some other people. That's the one that services this area that the department I know is working with in the moment on expanding those services. Okay. Next, last but not least, we have supported decision making, and I'm taking off my parent hat now for just a minute. I'm taking off my professional hat and I'm putting on my parent hat. The reason supported decision making was so valuable for Alabama is because up until now, you had to decide, are we going to have a guardian or are we not going to have a guardian? And if you chose to not have a guardian, you were really and truly wide open and risking a lot of things that could have jeopardized the future for your child if they had a disability and chose to sign on the dotted line to buy that car that they didn't talk to you about, right? But now with supported decision making, we have a team of people in place to support my son to make decisions before he makes them. I think the best part about this team is that he is learning to self-advocate with this team, because Colby has a pretty decent team, a set of people who are all different experts at what they do. He has learned, oh, I have a question about vitamins. I need to call Heidi. She's the nurse on my team. She would know that kind of information. Let me reach out to her and talk to her about which kind of vitamin I should be taking. Another example, when we were looking for cars, y'all all know how difficult it is to put a car in someone's name if you're on SSI and what that could jeopardize. But we happen to have somebody on Colby's team who is an expert and understands the finances involved and how Enable accounts work. And so he helped Colby put that together and shop for a car. That was a person's assigned role, not shopping for a car, but financial decision making on Colby's team. And so Colby has learned before he just makes his own decision that he's not sure about or automatically calls mom and dad, which is who it used to be all these years. He's learning how to advocate for himself, pick up the phone, call someone, set up a meeting face-to-face with them. And I cannot tell you as a parent how comforting it has become to know that in the event that Steve his father passed, we have a team, not just one person, not just two people, but we have a team of people that are going to be there with eyes and ears checking in on Colby, because that is their role. And Colby can call them or check in with them anytime in our absence. So they can literally see him and talk to him and help him make decisions going forward to maintain the lifestyle of interdependence that he's come to enjoy. That's a huge peace of mind as a parent. Question? I can see you. Okay. I can see the look in your eyes.
This is another one of those what ifs. And look, I'm going to ask you guys, please, when I ask these questions, bear with me on two things. First of all, the way I push my words together, I'm sorry, it's just the way I talk. The other thing is, I don't mean to sound negative in these questions. What I'm hopefully doing is conveying to you guys the difficulties that we faced, because that's pretty much what it's been for us. So when I ask these questions, it's not being negative. It's saying, this is where we are, this is where we've been. So when I ask you advice, it's because I'm here because we're kind of needing some. That said, those things sound fantastic. What if you've got somebody who is oppositional, who, whatever that team says, he's almost guaranteed to do the exact opposite? Because undiagnosed as it is, at least right this minute, we're looking to get that different. He's going to fight anything you put in front of his face. If you tell him he needs to take this vitamin, he's going to not take it and then say he did. If you tell him to bathe, he's going to go in the bathroom and run some water and walk out dirty. I mean, this is what we live with. This is our world. What then? What if you set these PCPs out, right? he doesn't do it. He's not going to do it. That's what I was saying earlier. He met one goal in 5 years, according to Medicare. He met that one goal. However, the behaviors didn't change. He would still give his information to anybody walking around. Even though it was a stranger danger goal that he supposedly met, he didn't really meet it because he still will do it in a heartbeat. So what do you do if everybody's putting forth their best foot and the progress is nothing?
Progress isn't there.
Then what happens? What happens to the waiver? What happens to the group home living? What happens?
I missed somebody. Oh. Okay, go ahead.
And of course, I'm going to speak as a parent and as a state representative, if you will, working for the state of Alabama. I have a child, teenager, who has a disability as well. But I, I've listened to you, throughout the entire meeting, and, I love your passion, and of course, I love everything that you're saying because I know you are a concerned parent. I will say, what's your son's name? If you don't, okay. So when I'm listening to you as a concerned parent, but I have not heard anything about what he wants. Not saying that you haven't asked, but one thing I had to learn, with my own child, I had to sit down and say, hey, Kaden, what is it that you want? Like, what is best for you? And I heard you say something about, you just mentioned about him, not wanting to take a bath or what have you. So have, you or his mom or any family member or team member, really sat in front of him and said, hey, let's write down a plan that you want. And the thing about those plans is that they often change from minute to minute, day to day, hour to hour. And I understand how difficult it can be because as a parent, it can be frustrating. But one thing that I learned, with dealing with my child is, me sitting down with his dad and his grandparents and really sitting down and saying, Kaden, what is it that you want? What does your world look like to you? So I would definitely recommend sitting down in front of him, even if it's like, hey, like today is Monday or Tuesday, or just, whatever day that he decides to say, you sit down and you tell us what is it that you want. Because we can tell, because, you and his mom can sit down and say, this is what we want for you, for you. But you guys really sitting down and asking him and allowing him, not allowing, but, giving him that opportunity to say and speak his mind. Because some days he may not want to take a bath, as detrimental or bad as it may be. But really, I would say let the leash go, or kind of untighten at least just a little bit and give him more leeway. As hard as it may be, I would say give him more room to breathe. Even if you may not like it, give him more space to be free. I mean, not being disrespectful or free to just do whatever, but just really step back and really see what he does in his own world and his own space. And I think you would probably get more leeway with doing that.
And also maybe see, and I don't know what the waiver that he's on, if they have positive behavior supports, but maybe finding a behavioral professional that can help with finding the why. Why is he doing this? And maybe where he's not responding to you all because, your parents, you're making him do what he needs to do and that sort of thing. He might respond better to somebody else, or a professional that can help figure out the socially significant improvements that he needs to make, and maybe put some, evidence-based approaches and interventions in place to help increase the behaviors you're wanting to see, or he's needing, to socially thrive.
One thing I will mention too is when I talk about supported decision making, that's on the end of your least restrictive options as far as support goes in a legal capacity. What's on the other end, the most restrictive option, is guardianship. But there's a lot of stuff in between. And outside of power of attorney, medically assisted. You want to list those again? Yes. What else? There's another one.
There's limited guardianship.
Limited guardianship. There are things in between that scale of supported decision-making and guardianship. So those aren't the only two options, but that does give you a good picture of what's the least restrictive option and what's the most restrictive option. Now, your other question that I think I heard you ask at the end was, where do you go from here? In other words, you're seeing or feeling or believing that you're stuck because the PCP doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of what's happening in the day-to-day. And so, then what? Did I hear that question, or is that?
Along those lines,
Okay.
in other words, if I may, I'll tell you what I'll do. Just so that I make this a little bit more clear, this was written as something for me by the guardian, my wife, his mother. So with regard to residential ID waiver, although I guess it goes to any of these waivers, what happens when the individual is not meeting PCP goals? What if the PCP goals are not obtainable, i.e. personal hygiene, sustainable work, meal planning and cooking for self, does not understand concept of money, has met stranger danger goal, but will still talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, and give personal information. Goal has been met by Medicaid standards, but individual would still not be safe on his own. Has met self-medicating goals, but does not know how or when to fill prescriptions. Cannot attend doctor appointments alone. When attends alone, does not understand doctor's orders or suggestions. What are the Medicaid expectations?
Okay.
That's exactly what she wanted to know.
Who was involved with that PCP?
Oh, golly.
Was Brandon involved with that PCP? Your son, your stepson?
Yes, he's always present.
Okay.
Always. Is he present?
Did he speak, I mean, if some of those were unattainable and he hadn't reached them, has he spoke up and said, I don't want to do that? I don't have to do that?
No, actually, he doesn't want to do any of them, just guessing, but I'm not there, so.
So I-
Absolutely say.
Yeah, I mean, and Grayson, please correct me if I'm wrong. Some of those, if he's not attaining them, take them out. Take them out. Put in there what he can attain.
That was what I had to
Yeah,
do myself.
yeah, and Medicaid has to honor that because that's what Brandon wants to do, okay? You know, if he don't want to take a bath every day, you know, and I have to go back to what.
No, I am going
Yeah.
down, I am
Yeah.
talking more like weeks than days.
Exactly, exactly.
We are talking
Yeah,
about it.
and when my daughter got to that point where she didn't do anything we asked her to do, didn't want to meet any goal, as bad as I hated it, I just had to step back and let it happen, okay? And then let her make her own decisions, and the committee or whoever, which was family and other people, we let it go. We, you know, this is what she wants to do. We did get her that professional help. She agreed to do that, where she would go and talk to not really a psychiatrist, but a counselor type person. And when she started doing that, another different perspective from them kind of brought her back around to reality, to where, okay, maybe they were looking at my best interest. Maybe I need to at least try this, where it was employment. And she tried it. She failed 7 or 8 times, but she tried it, okay? And now she agreed to let her, you know, she finds her own employment, and she does. She takes pictures for, she has a boyfriend, and they play flag football every Sunday. She takes pictures for them. They pay her to take the pictures, okay? She's been to weddings, anniversaries, from people just getting the word out, taking pictures. She can drive, so through our neighbor, there was a lady, a visually impaired lady, needing to be transported to grocery shopping, getting her nails, hair done. They call her because of her other diagnosis of autism and OCD. She, you know, best driver I got out of my 3 kids, okay? And she gets on to me because I'm on her Life 360. I get a text, slow down, okay? But we had to, I'm gonna tell you, she hit rock bottom, okay? She did. And she was the finest she could be, but once we let it go and realized that she realized we were caring about her, things started to change. But that was only because we let her make the decisions. We finally accepted her telling us no, you know, on this. So I'm just saying, and Medicaid has to accept it because that's what this individual wants. But some of these obtainable goals that are in there that, you know, they can't take them out of there. You have every right in the world as a parent to take those out of there. Am I speaking wrong?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're based.
Yeah.
They do have to have some goals.
Right, some goals.
But if they're not attainable the way they are, you can break them down.
Down.
And make them small.
Smaller, yes.
There's a concept that's taught
Yeah.
called baby steps. And I love the guy that does the workshops, and his name is escaping me right now. But if you'll hang out after the meeting, I'll Google it because I've got it on my phone. But he talks about breaking down goals that seem to be unobtainable into baby steps and taking 4% of a jump the next time instead of 40%. And then by the time you've done that 4 or 5 times, eventually you'll be able to meet the goal, but you just got to tweak it to the point where maybe we're not taking a whole bath, but can we brush our teeth? Things like that. But I believe in the baby steps goal because it's what got my son to drive, and it worked for us. He's still got some restrictions on it, but he can drive. And he was 24 years old when he got his license. And he watched his 16-year-old brother, 6 years younger than him, drive for that many years, still trying. And he got there. So baby steps can be huge. Hang on.
And having a good team in place helps, having support coordinators that are knowledgeable and setting the reality, setting goals that are realistic, and having a real good team in place is always beneficial. And I don't know where you're at, what county, I don't know anything, but, if there's anything that, that you're questioning or whatever, please voice that to your team, and let them know, like, we're setting these goals and he's not getting to it. What do you suggest? And if just by some chance, let's just say, like, what I see is we have new support coordinators that are, young and inexperienced, and they don't always, just like all of us, anybody that starts out, we're new and we don't know what all possibilities are there. So they're doing the best they can, but, maybe broaden the team a little bit. Would be a suggestion.
Which, as you had said, if I may, stepping back helped with your daughter. So, and if you do that and it does help with your son, it could also be that these behaviors are more of him frustration at not being able to meet the goals that are set for him. But not only his frustration, but he can see and tell that you guys are frustrated as well, which is making him even more frustrated.
And I'll just jump in and say that Medicaid does require that the person has goals, but they have to be SMART goals, and that is how that is trained with the case or support coordinators. And one of the A in SMART is attainable. And so they have to be obtainable. They have to be time limited, measurable, all of that good stuff. But if you're having issue with the support coordination agency and the team, the PCP is a living document. So at any point in time, you can reach out with those concerns, and they should have a special team meeting to discuss that if he's frustrated or they aren't attainable, so that you are able to update that plan as a team. And then if that avenue doesn't work, I would encourage getting advocacy involved. There are advocates out there to do that. It's also a good segue to, we were talking about the settings regulation. We've got a new regulation coming out called the access rule that starts July 1st. There are about 2 to 6 years to implement it. However, one of the requirements, and it's the 2-year one, is that there is going to be a system in place in the state specifically for concerns with PCPs as well as the settings rule, where interested parties, family members, people, whoever can actually grieve if they're having difficulties with the person-centered planning process and the settings rule. So that's in the works as well. But until then, I would encourage advocating and going back to the team as well.
And just a reminder, PCP stands for person-centered planning. I mean, if the person isn't at the center of that, then we're doing something wrong. And it sounds perhaps in your case that it may be missing there.
And also, I think I'm a legal guardian for a family member of mine. She's my 60-year-old aunt. She's nonverbal, but she talks to me and expresses what her goals are by telling me when she's doing things that she really enjoys. And I take note of that and I say, oh, this is what she wants to do. Or when she's really frustrated, I'm like, oh, she doesn't like that goal. So she's already telling me everything that she wants to do. And my job as a legal guardian is to help the team understand that and say, look, she loves going to birthday parties. If she could every day, she'd eat cake and open up presents. Now, it's not going to happen every day, but maybe it's a goal of hers that over the next 6 months, we try and get her invited to as many friends' birthday parties. Or we notice that when she has trouble walking around the house, she does not like that at all. She gets angry. You know, she has cerebral palsy. And so we noticed that if she goes to the pool and works out, that she's more able to walk around the house. Now, she doesn't always like going to the pool. So then it's like, how do we make it easier and more enjoyable for her to get in the pool? Because we know she wants to be able to walk on her own a little bit more. Well, we found out that if she has like a male trainer that'll get in the pool with her, she'll do whatever he wants, you know, and then she has a better week because she's able to move more. But she's always telling me and the team what her goals are by how she's enjoying it or not enjoying it. And then it's our job to take what she's telling us and make those into goals so that she can smile more and enjoy her day more.
Awesome. Thank you. Eric Gull, if you want to look up Eric Gull, Goll videos, he does workshops and talks about how to get those obtainable goals into your person-centered plan among reaching a higher level of independence. I highly recommend his workshops, his Facebook page, all of that, all of the above. So, wrapping up with supported decision making, you can go online and watch on YouTube the Colby Act video. It's a 5-minute video. It talks about his journey with it, and it gives you more resources. ADAP, ADAP has 4 different videos describing supported decision making and how to utilize it. I will wrap it up with this on supported decision making. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's so easy. There's even a template for a team agreement within the bill itself. It's not hard to do. Does it take effort? Yes. Does it take consistency? Sure. But it's not hard. It's very, very doable. Okay, last but not least, we're going to pass out these pamphlets for self-directed services. If you have not heard about self-directed services yet, you need to look into it because, again, just like a person-centered plan is supposed to do, it puts the person in charge of directing those services, which sometimes may be their employee on record at the end of the day. But the idea behind self-directed services is to be able to utilize your natural supports within your own community the way that you want to utilize them. Did I say that right? Does that make sense? So look over our pamphlet with self-directed services because that is an option available to you when you have, especially community waiver program. It's huge. Okay. I think I've covered everything. Life course tools. I love the life course tools. If y'all have not looked up online the life course tools yet, I'd recommend you do that. It's life course tools. You can come and grab one of these if you want. This is just an example of one of the things that they do. Lifecoursetools.com, I think, is the website. All right. Any questions? Amy, give me the name. I don't think you ever named your book.
Oh, that's the pretty copy.
This is the pretty copy. But this is one. You have more, but this is one of them. Human Rights Committees from Compliance to Cultural Commitment, Steve Baker and Amy Tabor. This is a really good read. This is an informative read is what this is. I think I've covered all of the resources. If anybody has any questions that you want to keep on a more personal level, feel free to come and see any of us after the meeting. We'll be here. Bye. Thank y'all all so much. I appreciate it.